Pre-biology class, Fatima Convent High School, myself Dipali, Chapter 14, Natural Resources. Today's session, we are going to study about Biogeochemical Cycle. Now, what is Biogeochemical Cycle? Bio means related to Biosphere, Geo means earth, and chemical means the substances which are around us. We know they are chemical substance. And cycle, that is a circular arrangement where the starting and ending point is same. Now we understood what is biotic and abiotic components in the biosphere. Now let us see how and what is the link between the biotic and the abiotic component. A constant interaction between the biotic and abiotic components of the biosphere makes it a dynamic but stable system. This interaction consists of a transfer of matter and energy between the different components of biosphere. Let us look at some processes involved in the maintenance of the above balance. Now, the balance in the ecosystem is an important factor required to keep the environment healthy and living. For that, we saw that there are few important components. Now, the water cycle. We know that water is obtained from rain, and then where does the water in the raindrops come from? Or how does this water keep on getting generated? Now we have seen how the water evaporates from the water bodies and subsequent condensation of this water vapor leads to rain. But we don't see the sea and ocean drying up. So, how is the water returning to these water bodies? The whole process in which the water evaporates and falls on land as rain and later flows back into the river or sea is known as water cycle. So a water cycle is the motion of water from one form to the other form and back to the first one. This cycle is not as straightforward and simple as this statement seems to imply. All of the water that falls on land does not immediately fall back into the sea. Some of it seeps into the soil and becomes part of the underground reservoirs of fresh water. Some of these underground water finds its way to the surface through springs, or we bring it to the surface for our use through wells or tube wells. Water is also used by terrestrial animals and plants for various life processes. Let us look at another aspect of what happens to water during the water cycle. Now the diagram here shows the water cycle. You can say the sun is the source of heat. The sun heats the various sources of water, that is, the lakes, rivers, or wherever water is available, even in the process of transpiration. Now, this heat of the sun evaporates the water, and water reaches back into the atmosphere, and after condensation and precipitation, it comes back on the earth in form of rain, back to these reservoirs. So the cycle starts from one sphere, the water moves to the other sphere and comes back to the first sphere. Now let us look at another aspect of what happens to water during water cycle. As we know, water is capable of dissolving a large number of substances as water flows through or over rocks containing soluble minerals. Some of them get dissolved in it. Water Thus rivers carry many nutrients from land to the sea, and these are used by marine organisms. So this is what we call it as water cycle. Now let us just understand it through the diagram. Now, what are the main processes involved in the water cycle? Now, water cycle is also known as hydrogen or hydrological cycle because it is related to water. Now, we know that plants, animals obtain water from various sources to carry out their biological processes. Roots of the plant absorb water which is needed to perform the photosynthesis and for other processes in plants. Animals fulfill the requirement of water by water bodies from the forming the surface water. Human beings take underground water also from their consumption and use. Water is used by us for drinking, cooking, irrigation, washing, bathing, etc. Now, there are n number of water sources on the biosphere and the lithosphere. Now, this is all water in the water bodies like ocean, sea, lake, pond, rivers, canals, streams, etc. etc. gets converted into vapor form by the process of evaporation. And this water, after evaporation, reaches to the atmosphere in the form of vapor. As well as through the process of transpiration from the trees and from the animal bodies, also the water is transferred into the atmosphere. Now this water which is transferred into the atmosphere gets condensed and precipitates into raindrops after forming the clouds. Now this water which is in the form of clouds will again drop back onto the earth in the biosphere in the form of rain. So, very simply, you can understand how the water moved from one sphere to the other sphere. Always remember, you need to know the movement of the water or the component and the spheres through which it is flowing. So, if we try to understand, summarize this, then we know that there are four spheres, that is atmosphere, lithosphere, biosphere, and hydrosphere. Now, this is the pathway for the flow of water. Water is flowing, so it is called as water cycle. Now, this water which is present in lithosphere, biosphere, atmosphere goes to the atmosphere, and from the atmosphere it comes back to the hydrosphere, to the lithosphere and to the biosphere again. And so the cycle of water is completed. Now the processes involved in this is evaporation, transpiration, condensation, precipitation, so by the process of evaporation and transpiration, the water moves from the lithosphere, biosphere and hydrosphere to the atmosphere, and by the process of condensation and transpiration, water comes back to the three spheres from the atmosphere in form of rain. And the source for the evaporation transpiration is sunlight or the sun's heat. So the cycle can be said as atmosphere, hydrosphere. Now from lithosphere it goes to the atmosphere by evaporation. From hydrosphere it goes through evaporation, and through biosphere it goes through transpiration. Now in the atmosphere, from condensation, and precipitation, it comes back to the lithosphere and biosphere and hydrosphere by the sun with the help of sun's heat. This is your water cycle. Is it easy to understand now? The next cycle which we are going to do is the nitrogen cycle. As I told you, in any of the cycle you have to remember the pathway, the processes and the agents who are carrying on this cycle and who is being carried around. So here water is being carried around by the process of evaporation and transpiration, condensation and precipitation, and it is moving from lithosphere, biosphere, hydrosphere to the atmosphere, and from the atmosphere back to lithosphere, biosphere and hydrosphere. I hope this is clear to you. Thank you.